the unredacted search warrants tied to hush money payments by President Trump's former fixer and attorney Michael Cohen to porn star Stormy Daniels. Those documents just posted online. Tom Winter, NBC News investigative correspondent, has been combing through them over the last few minutes. Maya Wiley, MSNBC legal analyst, joins me now, and so does Matthew Miller, MSNBC justice and security analyst. Tom, I'll start with you. I know you've just had a few minutes to start sifting through. What do you see so far?
So, Craig, bottom line here is there's about 20 pages of unredacted materials that lay out why the FBI should be able to search Michael Cohen's properties and some of his electronic devices and be able to kind of put together a case. And this is the FBI's affidavit to the judge saying, hey, we believe we have reason, probable cause. It's called a probable cause affidavit to be able to do these searches. And what we're getting now is not new information in that these payments occurred, that Michael Cohen was involved, that American Media, the publisher of the National Enquirer, was involved. We've known all that. We've known all that since at least August of last year. What we're getting today is a little bit of a snippet as far as how involved the president was when he was then candidate Donald Trump. Let me read you something. This comes from the document. It says that, and this is the FBI agent writing, it says, I have learned that in the days following the Access Hollywood video, Cohen exchanged a series of calls, text messages, and emails with Keith Davidson. At the time, he was Stormy Daniels' attorney, David Pecker and Dylan Howard of American Media, the publisher of the National Enquirer, Donald Trump and Hope Hicks, who was then press secretary for Trump's presidential campaign. The agent continues writing, saying, based on the timing of these calls and the content of the text messages and emails, I believe that at least some of these communications concern the need to prevent Clifford, that's Stephanie Clifford, that's Stormy Daniels' legal name, from going public, particularly in the wake of the Access Hollywood story. It continues, Craig, to describe a series of phone calls that occurred starting October 8th. There were phone calls that Cohen had received from Hope Hicks, and then at some point they get Donald Trump on the phone for over 4 minutes, according to toll records that the FBI was able to get from Michael Cohen's phone. So they're not saying that they have Donald Trump's phone, but they're saying that they have Michael Cohen's phone. And then there were a series of calls made between Cohen and Hicks, and at least several times, and there were follow-on conversations that occurred between Cohen and the people at the National Enquirer, as well as the president. So there were several calls that occurred. So bottom line here, Craig, nothing that changes the fact of whether or not there was a scheme in play, as prosecutors put it, to pay Stormy Daniels for silence for her story, whether or not Michael Cohen was involved, whether or not American Media, which publishes the National Enquirer, whether or not they were involved. But that individual one, who Michael Cohen identified as the president, his involvement is detailed here, and it's not based just on Michael Cohen's word. And I think that's an important revelation from today's document. In fact, it is based on the FBI agent's review of telephone records belonging to Michael Cohen, where they have identified Donald Trump, then candidate Donald Trump's phone number, and have pointed out that there were several phone conversations that occurred. And in the estimation of the FBI agent and their probable cause filing here, the president was involved in this campaign finance scheme.
I know, again, the document appears to be about 269 pages long, so I know you're still going through it. Tom, it looks like there's some sort of wire transfer that's referenced as well on October 27th of 2016, which would have been just days before the election. What more do we know about that?
So that's all tied to the payments that we know that were occurring with respect to a payment to Stormy Daniels' then attorney, not Michael Avenatti, but her attorney at the time, Keith Davidson. Okay. And it was money that was going to go to Keith Davidson, and then he was going to give that money to Stormy Daniels. So that's what that payment is about. And basically, what the FBI agents have to do here is they have to say, look, based on the information we've already gathered, you know, it's one thing for us to say, hey, we think that a payment occurred and we think there's a scheme here. They actually went through the banking records. They actually went through toll records. They had access through a court-ordered warrant to Michael Cohen's iCloud account and some of his email messages. So they were able to piece together these conversations and these discussions as they move forward with their case. And really, by Michael Cohen pleading guilty last August, a lot of this kind of granular detail that we expected to get today, and we are getting, a lot of that granular detail, Craig, we weren't going to see, because if they had filed an indictment at the time and Michael Cohen wanted to go to trial, a lot more of this information would be made public. But it wasn't made public at the time because he agreed to plead guilty to 2 counts tied to these campaign finance violations.
Matt Miller, your reaction to what you just heard there, and again, I know we should point out that we are still sifting through this voluminous
and one important point there, Craig, if I can just interrupt you. There are 269 pages here. There's an additional 5 search warrants that have also been filed. I'm in the process of uploading that back to the control room and getting that to you literally as we speak. But the probable cause affidavit is pretty much the same throughout all of them. So this key 20 pages that we get today is really the bulk of the unredacted information that we're going to see. So it's just this one section for folks that are going through this at home.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.